Hello everyone, and as you can see, it is very dark where I am, and that's because we have a power outage at the moment, and so I am running this. Actually, one of the most common questions I got was, what book is it that you posted? Because I put a picture on my Instagram story of a book as kind of the background, and many of you asked what it was, so I'm going to show you. It was from this, which is the Linguaphone Irish course. I bought it many years ago. It was on sale in a bookshop. The Linguaphone course is kind of, this book is all in Irish, for example. I have a couple of these, and this is all in Irish, and then this is explanations of the language, and an index as well, like vocabulary and stuff like that. This is a course, if you've ever heard of Linguaphone, or you're not quite sure of Linguaphone, Professor Arguelles, Alexander Arguelles, actually made in any Japanese characters or alphabets, so it's quite interesting that it's just written in Romanji, and it's not written in Romanji, as far as I remember, with the macron over the longer vowels. It's written just in a sort of a normal romanization, I guess. I think it uses double. I'd have to have a look. I don't know which shelf it's on right now, otherwise I would get it and show you. So that was the book that you many of you asked what it was, and the other questions I had. ¿Cómo mantener un nivel de fluidez si no interactúo diariamente con gente extranjera, please? Nice question. Eso es una pregunta. La verdad es que para hacer una cosa así hay que hablar con alguien, hay que utilizar el idioma, porque si no lo vas perdiendo. Entonces sí que tienes que hacer algo. No se puede mantener un idioma hasta un punto, por ejemplo, si has vivido en un país o, no sé, has estudiado un idioma en la ciudad, por ejemplo, vas a tratar de mucho tema en el idioma. Así que para practicar vocabulario, la gramática y también para poder expresar tus opiniones en los idiomas, hay que practicarlo. Porque si no lo practicas, pues vas perdiendo algo de vocabulario. Y eso también es verdad con tu idioma también, con los primeros idiomas que has aprendido en tu vida. O sea, si no tienes la práctica para tratar de algunos temas, que se resulta más difícil luego hablar sobre ello. Entonces yo puedo recomendar algunas cosas, como por ejemplo lo de Clubhouse, o también Hilocal, o puede ser también en alguna otra parte de internet para tener acceso a cuarto en las redes sociales, para poder practicar sobre temas importantes para ti y también en el idioma mismo. En un lugar como por ejemplo Clubhouse sí que hay bastantes idiomas que se utilizan para hacer esto, así que resulta bastante fácil utilizar los idiomas así, pero claro, hay otros idiomas que no, y hay que hacer más esfuerzo para hacer esto, y eso podría ser, por ejemplo, encontrar personas en internet para hacer intercambio de idioma, o sea, también pagar a una persona para practicar o aprender el idioma también. So, the next question I have is, I need some advice about learning methodologies in Persian, Russian, and Chinese. That's a huge ask. I don't know if I can answer that completely in just one answer. Learning methodology, I'll talk about that generally in this talk. So we're talking about languages and language learning, right? It's a real variety that you have there of languages. So I mean, I'll do my best to incorporate them all, and I'll sort of take that on board for the rest of the talk. Let me see. And then I had quite a long message. Had one long message here. The idea of a language community and what that means, and having access to certain people, and is there a real community for learning? Does that exist? And I've heard this spoken about before in terms of on these lives actually. Some of you have written and said that they found certain groups quite toxic, quite difficult to get really positive feedback, or even people to study with the language. It's one of the reasons why I started the Patreon thing, because it will be a place where we will be able to study together, and my goal with that will be to get a group together where we just encourage each other and answer questions. We have lives, we have interactions, and yeah, I mean, as soon as that starts going, then hopefully that will be a place where a community can really start to flourish in terms of having real support and a network of people that we can trust. And as I said last time, that for me would be this is for language study, right? There are other networks I can talk about as well. I've just seen the Polyglot Conference as well mentioned, and yeah, the Polyglot Conference, the Polyglot Gathering, Women in Language, which is going to be on very soon, and the tickets are available for that. And you've also got Langfest that works for the Polyglot Conference now, but in some stage in the future we'll go back to having events in Canada. So there are a number of events that go on, and trying to think, I don't want to leave anyone out, but I don't do that on purpose. But if there are other events that you know of, then that's fine. Like Polyglotar, I've just realised I've left out. But there are kind of communities attached to those types of events as well, where people actually make friends and then go off and talk to each other and even continue the friendships away from the events themselves. But I think what I'm talking about here and during this live is more the idea of partnerships to take us through the experience of language learning together. And as far as I'm concerned, this is something I've kind of started doing with a number of people, and I think that actually Patreon's going to be probably a good way to do this, where we have daily interactions with each other, we have daily updates with each other, we get to ask each other questions and talk, and if this works, then I could definitely put more emphasis on sort of the support for language learning. Thank you very much, Jonathan. So Jonathan said, womeninlanguage.com, March 4th to the 6th, organised by Kirsten Cable, Lindsay Williams and Sean Kennedy. Thank you for saying that in there, Jonathan. I really appreciate it. You had the dates to hand and I didn't. But I know that I just retweeted a tweet by Lindsay, because I know that the tickets have just gone on sale now for Women in Language. And Women in Language, just to say as well, is not just for women. It's women who present, and so that's the idea. Is it's for women to present, but it's not just for women. It's for everyone. Everyone's welcome to attend and to listen to the talks and things, and to get involved and answer questions and things. So it's not exclusively an event for women. It's just run by women, and women present. And I think that's a nice thing. I'm a big fan of events where they give a platform where people can feel safe from certain parts of our society, but then remain open for everyone to be able to hear the important words and important messages that these people have to say. And so I'm a big fan of that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a great event. I've been to it myself, and I hope you enjoy the event. And also, if you really love someone and you go and you hear a talk, for example, that you really love, and you think that they'd be great for the Polyglot Conference, I'm always open to hear that. And I think it's great to hear people in more places as well. So if ever you go to an event, if you ever hear anybody speaking that you really like, either it's on YouTube, or you follow someone on Twitter, or on Instagram, or on TikTok, or anything like that, I think the more people, the more audiences we reach with an important message is sort of the better. So feel free. I mean, these events are not mutually exclusive. We can all, share around and have people talk at different places, and I quite like that. So yeah, and anyway, I'm talking a bit more about events than about language learning, so I'll get back to language learning. So my thought is that Derek, thank you for that comment about sort of finding this idea of community. And yes, the communities do exist within people who meet at these events, but also I think that we can form communities in language study places where we do this either for very specific languages, when we find like-minded people who are studying the same language. We can definitely do it in those kinds of spaces. I'm quite a big fan of accountability, of actually giving very concrete advice and help to people, and I can do that to a degree on these lives, because you ask questions, I can give certain people very concrete advice to a degree. The thing is, when we get to speak to each other on a regular basis, and when we have that daily contact, we get to see more of the person. And so language learning, to my mind, is not always the same. And this was something that really hit home the other day when somebody said to me, okay, but how do you learn languages? And my honest answer is there isn't just one way. It's not like there's a course that I could sell you or a book I could sell you or something like that. I mean, yes, you'll get things out of these different places, right? Depending on who you are. One person might read a book on language learning or follow a course on a specific language and absolutely love what they've read and what they've done and what they've learned, and it might work wonderfully well. And then the next person might do the same thing and then find that it doesn't really work. And this is why you get these kind of very different reactions from different people in the same language communities, and the people who you'd expect would find something great and then say, oh yeah, but it doesn't work for me, or it really worked for me. And some people will be quiet in the background because they kind of don't want to say how they felt, and they think they maybe should feel the same way as the person who's done well with it, because they think that they're a successful person in language learning and therefore should be able to follow that same pattern or procedure or process, and it should work for them too. The fact is that it really doesn't work like that, and this is why I strongly believe in this idea of community, because we get to know each other and we get to know what works for each other on an individual basis. So my advice to one person is not going to be the same advice to other people. So when you're listening to me now and you hear something, if something strikes a chord with you and you feel it's something that could work in your life, then I'm really, really pleased. At the same time, you might try something I say and you might go away and say that doesn't work at all. It's just not happening. It's just not doing anything for me, and that's also fine. The thing I rely on is if you come back to me and say, actually, I tried that thing you said and it didn't work, then it's a case of finding what works for you, because there isn't a solution out there. I'm sure there's solutions out there for all of us, right, to find how we best learn language. And this is where I think it's really important to have an open lines of communication. And I found that during the sessions I've been doing over the last 6 weeks with some new groups, but also this is where I think that, with the Patreon page I set up, that I will be able to really answer questions and give me feedback on how you perceive that page, please, because at the moment, I'll be very honest with you, no one signed up, and it's been a week, and that's fine. I didn't really expect everyone to jump on it, and also I appreciate that it might not be a price range. Now, the price on the Patreon thing for me to get back and answer people's questions is set at a monthly thing, right? So this is kind of a month, but I'm going to be spending quite a few hours a week working on this with everyone who gets involved, and I won't be doing it as kind of for me, it won't be a kind of a joke thing. It will be a really serious thing that we will do. So if anyone does want to sign up, just so you know, it will be a serious thing that we do. I will actually keep you accountable for your learning, and I will work with you, and I will set up sessions where we actually talk and you ask very specific questions and you get very specific answers to your needs. But there are definitely, and I think, Jonathan, you've mentioned this here, learning language can often be like, like you say, it takes a village to raise a child, or a community, and it is the same thing with language learning. We all need to kind of be involved, and we need to have people to support us and help us. And I think this is where, for me, it's super important that we are open, receptive, and honest with each other. And one of the things that I've noticed in language learning and the questions I get, the most common thing that I notice is honesty is super important. And what I mean by honesty is honesty with yourself. So it's JR says that the stream is not working. I don't know if that's what's happening. That's very odd. Okay. So the weird thing is, I'm just the weird thing is that I talk about honesty, and it sounds weird saying honesty, right? Because you think that you're honest with yourself. My experience with language learners is that we're not. And we're not honest with ourselves for a number of reasons. First of all, we take a measure of our ability to learn a language from the best day ever, when we really went, sort of above and beyond, and we studied like crazy for like a week for a test. And we got to the test and we aced the test. We did really, really well. We got like 100%. It was amazing. And we got to this amazing stage with our learning, right? And what happens is, that I find, is we then have that idea in our heads as, this is what I can do. Not, this is me at my best. This is what I can do, right? And so even through school, I remember I had friends and they'd say, actually, no, I can do way better than this. And every single thing they did after that, 100%, no, I can do better. I know I can do better. This isn't my normal. This is me, like, on a bad day. No, that was you on a really, really good day when you got this 100%. That was you giving up going out with your friends. That was you giving up doing other things. That was you giving up doing lots of stuff, right? But unfortunately, what we do is we tend to take that as our benchmark. And then we do that when we get to languages too. So we have this benchmark of, we should be remembering lots and lots of stuff. Like, everything we see, we should be remembering. And what happens? That's not what happens on a daily basis. And language learning is over a very long period of time. And we can't do it to the point where we can't do it to the point where we are simply excelling every single day. It's just not how it works. And what happens is, we get very disappointed. So we're disappointed in not achieving something that is our absolute best, when we do nothing else but focus on that one thing. So the problem with that is that that's not real life. We don't have the option to just like switch everything off and focus just on languages 100% of the time. It's just not something we can usually do. And so it becomes untenable. It becomes just kind of a non-option for us to imagine doing that. Unfortunately, we do think that that's what we can do. And that thought and idea just doesn't seem to go away. And we stop being honest with ourselves. And I don't think we do this on purpose, but we do it. We think that we can just do, like, we're robots or some sort of machines, and we get disappointed, and then our motivation goes, and then we stop, and we tell each other that we're terrible at studying languages. And it's not true. It's just that we've not been honest with ourselves. It's the first thing about honesty that I've noticed. Second thing about honesty that I've noticed is being honest about your workload and your life and what you do and your goals. So the second one, really, first of all, is related to what you have going on in your life and when you can actually study. So you need to identify when you can actually study. And if you can't do that, then there's a problem, because you then need to look at how your goals meet or match with what time you have to study. Now, if you set your goals as, like, I want to speak, I don't know, Spanish to an A2 level in 3 months or even 6 months, right? And at the moment you don't speak a language that's closely related. Well, unfortunately, 6 months isn't really going to cut it to get to a solid A2 level in that time, unless you have enough time to be able to dedicate to the language itself. And what happens is that we keep this idea of this A2, or even some people even say B1 or B2 in such a short amount of time. And what happens is we don't change that if we don't actually have the time to dedicate it. So we set the goal, We don't look at the time we have. We carry on. We just do it whenever we can, and we miss days, and we don't do this, and we do that, and we don't do the other. And then we get to the 6-month period, and we've maybe reached an A1 level, but like not in a very standardized way. So what happens is, instead of being happy with your A1 level, because you could have revised your goals, right, and said, okay, I'm going to get to A1, so let's aim for A1. That's more realistic for the amount of time I have available. We keep the B2 or B1 level or whatever it is in our heads, and then we look up from our achievement to what we didn't achieve, instead of looking down from our achievement to where we started. And we're disappointed, and we're despondent, and we feel like we failed, but we ignore what we've done. So that's the other reason why I think being honest with yourself about the time you have and what you actually study and what you do is super important. And then reasons why you're studying it. Okay, what are you studying and why? I hear from people who say that they want to speak a language. And then they say, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm only going to read, or I'm only going to read, I'm only going to do this, or I'm only going to do that. And the thing that's missing is speaking, right? Now, if your goal is to speak, first of all, you need to speak. You need to practice speaking. It's not going to appear from thin air. It's not going to be a magical thing that happens. You need to practice speaking. It's just the way it is. Second thing that I notice people a lot of the time forget to do is identify what sort of language is important. So if you're going to speak, first of all, what are you going to first of all need to speak about? Sometimes it's as simple as making a list in your own language, just to know and concentrate and focus on the type of vocabulary, the type of sentences, the type of grammar you need to be able to communicate those ideas. Really important. If you're not doing that, then do it, because it helps to focus you and it helps to focus your studies, and it gives you a goal. And I saw somebody wrote here, SMART goals. That's a type of thing that could fit under a SMART goal. SMART is something that's measurable, something that you can actually look back and review and test and see that it works, okay? So SMART goals are actually a really good idea. Yeah, it's really, really good. So Jonathan's saying keep an eye in the rear view mirror to see where you're going and where you've come and where you've come from is really, really good. So the honesty with what you can do can then also spill over into the kinds of books that you have, the kind of activity you do. So when it comes to following a method, a piece of advice, even what you're reading and what you're using to the language, if you find that you are not picking up that material, that book, whatever it is, ask yourself why not. Is it because you find it boring? Is it because it's not engaging? It's not doing for you what you need it to do to learn the language? If that's the case, then you need to be very honest with yourself again and say, actually, this isn't working. And I need to either ask people or check myself for other materials, other things that will work for me. So there are certain strategies of language learning that work for some people and don't work for others, as I mentioned. So some people love doing translations backwards and forwards. Some people love speaking, as soon as possible and practicing as much as possible. Some people love writing. Some people love just sitting and studying lots of grammar and learning the grammar very heavily. Some people love using sort of different things to play with to keep them entertained. Could be apps, could be flashcards, could be whatever it is that you like to do. It could be you like watching TV, it could be you like music, it could be like whatever you like. it's always good to incorporate that kind of stuff into your learning, just because it keeps you interested, it keeps you motivated, it gets you excited, it gets you energized about the language. And it doesn't really matter which language you're learning, but you need to do that. It's important, I think, and this is kind of why I'm very much course-based. I like courses, particularly in the beginning, because I find they give me structure. Some people hate them, and if you're one of those people that doesn't like them, then that's fine too. As long as you have something that does work for you, it's fine. I'll tell you why I like courses, though. Courses have been written for people learning languages over many, many years, many decades. And what do? They focus on a lot of things that you need to say in the beginning. They focus on common topics that we all talk about, whether it's in our first language or languages, or whether it's in other languages we learn. And knowing about, and I see someone's just mentioned the islands of languages. These, for me, are the core things, it's the core base of learning any language, is that you need to be able to use certain things to a degree, right? So you need to be able to talk about the weather, you need to talk about your family, you need to be able to talk about dates and times and routines and all the basic stuff that happens in our lives that's important to us, we need to talk about. Now, if you're finding the numbers hard in a language, focus on the important numbers, focus on your phone number, focus on your age, focus on your birth date, all those kinds of things that you may have to say, right? You don't have to necessarily get them all perfect straight away, but the ones that are important to you are the things that are important. And the same goes for other topics too. You don't need to have a gazillion words on every single topic from the very beginning. You can build that up gradually over time. You will pick it up when you talk to other people where they use the words that are important to them. And all of that is fine. The thing you can't really do is not have that. And the reason is this base, this core language that you learn, that's kind of the foundation of your language learning. Now, language learning, unlike pretty much any other subject I know, you need this base, and you need to carry that base with you wherever you go, whether it's in a direction of interest in philosophy, religion, politics, economy, or whether it's to do with whatever you like to talk about in your own language. You can't forget the base. It stays there, and it has to stay there, because you can never be in a conversation with somebody and they want to then, okay, it's nice weather today, or next week it will be sunny, let's meet in the park and go and talk about whatever we're talking about here, now, there. What time are you free? Which day can you manage? When are you working? All these basic elements of the language you have to sort of take with you. You can't just forget them. And so you need to really master those things. And this is one of the things that you notice when somebody learns a language that's similar to languages they already speak. These sorts of very basic things often are where the holes appear in their language. So they'll have a lovely conversation. You can get somebody who speaks Spanish and they'll learn Catalan, right? But they'll learn Catalan and skip maybe a lot of the basic stuff and go straight to the high-level conversations, like about politics or things which are very, very easy to do. You can talk very easily on some of these topics that would be seen normally as high-level topics. These are the easy things to talk about if you speak a similar language. But they've missed lots of the basic stuff that's very different. So telling the time in Catalan is quite different to telling the time in Spanish. And they miss that gap. And so it seems really weird when somebody's talking to this person and they're having a conversation about philosophy or whatever they're talking about. And then they say, well, what time do you want to meet? And the person can't tell the time. Unless it's like on the dot. It just, we get this kind of idea that I think this sort of A1, A2 level vocabulary and practice that we need is something we can just go over very quickly like this. but it takes time to really absorb it, and it takes time for it to sink in. And often it's this very basic stuff that's actually fundamental to how we then progress later on. It can be quite difficult to get it. And I find that studying with a course, for me personally, it gives me some explanations of what it's about, and it's sometimes a huge shortcut to understanding rather than spending time waiting for the same thing to appear many, many, many times. So I personally like courses for that reason. Now, if you don't like courses, it could also be that you haven't found the right course. It could be that you don't like the explanations in one, but you like them in another. Okay. Yeah, I like that. So yeah, you for example, Jonathan's mentioned that you can use even single digits to find things and to get around numbers or whatever. Instead of like knowing all the numbers and feeling very confident, you could say single digit numbers, and finding a way to actually just communicate is really, really cool. So these are the things that I've noticed with language learning. And with languages themselves, every language is different, and obviously I see people wanting to learn different languages, right? So somebody here mentioned Persian, Russian, and Chinese. Well, I mean, it's a huge breadth of language, and so what's easy in one or hard in another may be the opposite way around when you get to the second or the third language. Do I prefer group courses or one-on-one courses? I actually quite like groups. I do quite like groups. I mean, it needs to be at a place where I feel comfortable. Generally, I do. I mean, it's not that... none of the groups that I've been in really... I mean, there was one that was very, very, very slow, like really slow. And if you notice, the group has a dynamic where they're not interested in learning the language, and they're just there because they like the social thing more than the language itself, and they're basically treading water, then it might not be the best place to be. But you do get other groups where they're very, very keen on learning, and they want to improve and they want to move forward. And having that kind of camaraderie, I think, is quite handy, because you hear them repeat the same things and you repeat the same things, and so you get a lot of the repetition in those groups. So yeah, I do like groups. I work with a number of groups, in fact, on languages, and I really enjoy them. So yeah. But sometimes I do things on an individual basis. So Swahili, for example, I've been studying on my own. Estonian I studied on my own. A number of languages I did study on my own. I did have another question here. So there were two parts of the question from Maurizio. How do you calm down after intense language learning sessions using multiple languages at the same time or on the same day? I sometimes do feel that rush of, having used language, particularly languages that I'm just learning, and then I use them for the first time, or in it to a good level, and I feel that I've really achieved something, and you come out feeling really pumped, right? I just kind of ride with that. I like it. So I don't know why I'd want to come down from that. It's part of the excitement and the thrill of learning a language for me. I really enjoy it, but I think knowing that that's just one part and we need to carry on and get that feeling again, that helps me to come down to study once more and to get back into the language. So yeah, I suppose that's what it does, the thought of it. Do you think that comprehensible input becomes less useful, or rather more difficult to make use of the more similar languages we learn and know? Very good question, actually. So the idea of comprehensible input, I think, is a really good one. Stephen Krashen's a really, apart from being a very nice person that I've had the pleasure of meeting, he's also, got a lot of really cool things to say, and comprehensible input, it makes sense. The thing that I find people who have spoken to have difficulties with this is whether or not it is actually comprehensible input, or whether it's incomprehensible input. And am I back? Okay, hopefully I'm back. So, sometimes what I find is people not knowing what is comprehensible, what is incomprehensible, and so we kind of can go down rabbit holes with incomprehensible input. That basically we just end up reading over words and not really knowing what's going on, or not knowing what's happening. So it kind of, I guess you can become a bit text blind to that kind of thing. Same thing as if you hear radio or listen to language and you don't really know what's going on at all. Your brain can actually start shutting it out and making it and turning it into white noise that you don't really want to process, and you don't process. It's like a background noise that you just get used to. And when I think either of those are not particularly useful, to get the pronunciation, it can be handy to get the sort of, if we listen to it, but we have to listen to the language actively, right, and know why we're doing it. So if we're doing it to get an idea of how the language looks on the page or how it sounds, then that kind of incomprehensible input can possibly be useful. In fact, I would say it probably is useful to do. But comprehensible input is, you do have a bit of an idea of what's going on. It's not, more than a bit of an idea, you have an idea of what's going on. It's super easy to read things that are in almost or mutually exclusive, mutually intelligible languages. So, for example, for me to pick up a book in Scots and to read it, my comprehension of Scots over time will improve. There's no doubt about it. Will my reproduction of Scots improve? I don't know. I think Steve Kaufman and Stephen Krashen say yes, it will. My thought on this is that probably yes, but when and how long will it take? And is there a shortcut? Is there a way to better understand or help to predict things? And this is where I think that as adult learners, sometimes an explanation of what we're looking at can help, because then when we know we can rationalize what we're seeing. Then when we read it again and again and again, we understand the rationale behind it. So that's where I think there's a benefit in these explanations of things. Working with other people, asking people questions, however that is, but having some sort of interaction with either written explanations, spoken explanations, or something like that. Because some words and some phrases and some grammatical points don't appear over and over again. I mean, I can give you an example, okay? So a Slavic speaker could read Macedonian. They could read a book and use a dictionary and start picking up a lot of stuff, right? But there are certain parts of Macedonian grammar that, unless you speak to people and unless you know an explanation of why certain things happen, you will understand things slightly differently to how the language is actually used. Because your understanding will be different to the reality of the use of the language. And there are, for example, with the past tense, there are different types of past tense that we use in Macedonian. And so if you know the L form, which is typical for Slavic languages, for the past tense, and you read that in Macedonian, you will think that it maps on pretty much identically or similarly to the other Slavic language you speak. But it doesn't. The L form in Macedonian actually has more of a meaning of the mish form in Turkish, which is you weren't there to witness an event happening, and therefore it's more like a reported thing, right, that you didn't witness. And this distinction is really important in Macedonian. The issue is that if you use the wrong form, people don't perceive that as a mistake. They just think you mean something different than what you actually mean. And so you can never really get corrected. And this is where I think explanations come into their own, because that's just one example. There are bound to be many, many more where it's very difficult to just, you would have to read thousands and thousands and thousands of things to really pick up on some of these smaller points in the language, whereas a grammatical explanation can often resolve it very, very quickly. And so this is where I think it's the reading is good, but also these things are not mutually exclusive. These things shouldn't be things that we look at as like we choose this or that. As far as I'm concerned, they can live harmoniously in a symbiotic relationship that we can use them at both. And we can also mix in other things as well. There's no reason why we can't do a little bit of the sort of assimil method of translation or whatever, or we do a bit of, I don't know, whatever we want to do, right? We can do whatever we want. But I think that it's good to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as we say in the UK, to retain what's important and to keep the good stuff from all around. Yeah, the issue then with learning languages, particularly ones that are similar, is that sometimes we think we understand something and we don't. So I think I've got to the end of the questions and comments that I had. I think so. I'm going to see if I can agree. I'm going to agree. I just read I agree. I'm going to see if I can check for any more questions on here and see if I can answer any more things. I agree. That's why you shouldn't rely on any one method. Yeah, I'm glad you agree with that. It's this is where I say as well, I mean, look, there isn't just one way to learn a language. And this is why some people will follow a person or a method and just believe in that, and that's the only thing that works. And they think, yeah, if that works for you, that's fantastic. But also, if somebody comes along and it doesn't work for them, it's nothing wrong with that method. It's just that it doesn't work for that person. It's like, somebody might come along and say, I love the colour blue. And then somebody else comes and says, I absolutely hate the colour blue. It doesn't make the colour blue any better or worse from the first comment to the second comment. Same for TV shows, same for flavours, same for anything. I mean, we all have different opinions, and our different opinions don't define us completely, entirely. They maybe define part of us for a period of time. So what works for me now may not work for me later. What I think about something now may not be what I think about it later, or what I thought about it 10 years ago. Because I would like to think that as human beings, we learn and we develop and we change ideas, we change our perceptions, and we grow, right? I mean, that's why I'd like to think that we grow as individuals. So I'm very much in the camp of friends of mine believe many different things or think many different things and have many different opinions and have many different backgrounds, and that's fine. I'm not necessarily friends with all of those people for the same reasons either. And I imagine you also have friends that are very different and you're not friends with them for the same reasons. And the reason to learn certain languages will be different. The way to learn certain languages will be different. And this is why it's increasingly difficult to say to somebody, this is my method. The only method that genuinely is like universal is you have to do something. It's the only thing. Because if you're not doing anything, it's not going to happen like by magic. Harry Potter doesn't walk around with a wand at the end of 3 months and say, you've done 3 months of whatever, that you now speak the language, Linguistus magicus, I don't know. It's just not how it works. The only thing that's true is that you have to put time in, you have to put effort in, you have to put energy in. And the only way to do that is to set yourself goals. And the only way to do that is to also set time aside and to agree time and to treat the language with the level of respect you would a client or a partner or a very good friend. And if you don't do that, and if you're not prepared to do that, then you need to reevaluate what your goals are and why you want to learn the language. And if you then later decide, actually, I do need to go back and revisit what I want to do, then great. Okay, I've got to the end of what I wanted to say and a lot of the questions as well. So let me see if I can answer any questions that you potentially have here. I'll do my best. Okay. If you practice reading 30 minutes a day, how much time should you speak in a language, I find my reading levels are much higher than my speaking levels. If you're doing 30 minutes a day, I mean, it's a fair amount of time to be reading. It's good. Depends what you want to be saying. I mean, reading levels for a number of people actually tend to be higher, and that may never change. So you may need to just be happy with that. It may never change, depending on your comfortability, how comfortable you are with speaking. I think that you should, if you want to speak, at least start speaking a few times a week with a language partner, a language teacher, somebody on the internet who you want to talk to, or in real life. I think it's important to do it. There's not a definite time that you need to do it for. Usually what I would say is I try and study, if I want to feel that I'm moving forward in a language, I do at least 2 or 3 hours of study a week. And then on top of that, I would do language practice, whether it's listening to music, reading something, playing with on a game, or listening to songs, singing, or practicing speaking with somebody online as well. Sometimes the actual study is speaking online. I think understanding what you want to be able to say is really important. If you are finding that your reading is not as good as your speaking, finding what you want to say first, practicing that, and then building off that base to start saying more. And practicing with another speaker would be a really good way of doing it. Do you have any recommendations of drills so you improve an intonation prosody? I mean, Luca talks about this quite a lot. About Luca, what Luca tends to do is write down the words. So, for example, he'll have an audio. He'll have all the words written down. He'll listen to it, and he'll make markings on the page as to where words glide together, where the stress comes on not just the word but also on the sentence, and which words are not sort of sounds are not pronounced clearly or not pronounced at all. He'll make lots of markings on a page like that, and then he'll go through and read it. You can do that in conjunction with listening to the original, recording your voice, recording it before you make those kinds of markings, and then recording your voice afterwards, and then compare and contrast. So that would definitely, that kind of activity that Luca, and Luca expresses it way better than I have just done now, and in much more detail. But he's done that on many free available videos online that you can find. And I would recommend looking at how he does that, because that could be quite a handy way of doing it, particularly for intonation and prosody. Some of the things that I would add into the mix would be actually imitating the accent of the language you're speaking in your own language, because that helps you to see how the language feels on your own language, how that accent feels in your own language. So I find that kind of thing actually helps too. Listening to things that sometimes maybe I don't understand, but listening for the intonation of the language. Languages for me are kind of like, when I hear it, it feels a bit like a song that you don't really know yet. And so you almost can hum how it sounds. And you can make noises like how it sounds. And then you start finding out what the words mean and start replacing those sounds with words. A bit like a song that you learn to sing, but you don't know the words, but then you start filling in the words as you hear them more closely. It's a little bit like that. Я изучаю японский язык, чтобы вы продолжали по этому поводу. Я думаю, что это очень это тоже очень важно использовать, как у тебя каждый день изучаться. Может быть, я не знаю, сколько у тебя времени для этого, но каждый день изучаться чуть-чуть по-японски. Это значит, для меня я делаю 3 раза в неделю. Это значит, в понедельник, в среду и тоже в пятницу я изучаю ирский сейчас. И это значит, 1 час. э, 1 час я читаю диалог или текст, и тоже и грамматику для этого, для текста. И поэтому я слушаю аудио в этом языке, а потом я использую текст для читания. Значит, я читаю, что я слушаю, а потом я слушаю еще 1 раз. И это очень важно, когда у вас и разные писания, как по-японски, например, потому что надо свідчити, як ти читаєш, як ти можеш читати этот язык от книги. И после этого надо тоже думать очень много как они используют грамматику или слова по-японски. И это для меня как анализа языка. Я думаю, потому там есть, я не знаю, сейчас, окей, хорошо. И потому там они используют одно слово или эту грамматику. Я не знаю, если это значит, что если я хочу коммуницировать мысли на японском, надо использовать эту структуру для этого, от грамматики. Много часто это самое важное дело изучения языка, потому что это значит, что ты понимаешь не только как использовать, не только это слова, не только эту грамматику, но тоже как они используют и почему. Это самое почему, это очень важно. И когда ты не используешь книгу или курс языка, тоже можешь и использовать и музыку или радио, или ничего, слушать язык. Это очень красивый способ слушать и тоже использовать язык, когда у тебя нет часа. Okay. Я надеюсь, что это хороший отговор для тебя. Okay, conversational speaking is the goal for me now. My goal is it's business to have unique language exchange partners. Yeah, it's cool to have exchange partners. Would be really cool. So let me see. Does reading help you learn new vocabulary? Reading can help you learn new vocabulary, absolutely. The question is, does it help you learn active vocabulary? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It just depends on what you're reading. Let's say, for example, if you were to read literature even in your own language, would you then be able to legitimately use all of that vocabulary outside of the book? Probably not, because the people you speak to won't necessarily speak in that way and use that vocabulary, so that might be a bit of an issue. But generally speaking, yes, it will make you more aware of the language and hopefully make you more aware of some etymological links between words, vocabulary within the language, and even across languays. Pay more attention to Russian-speaking students. accent in English, then apply the Russian accent on English. Fantastic, Jonathan. I'm glad that works for you too. I used to do that a lot. Richard, what's the saying? Sen çok seviyorsun. Oh, oh, okay. Merci. Thanks for your answer. I read just recently a book that children can distinguish the difference between syllable stress and timed language even before, oh my word, it's so hard, birth. Okay, what's your point with somebody? Okay, yeah. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to read some of these things here. Let me see. Pozor, ciężko zakończyć to trudny język. Okay. Chciałbym nauczyć się francuskiego od czego zacząć? To trudne. Tak, to trudne. To tak, właśnie, ja myślę, że to jest znaleźć jakiś kurs francuskiego, to będzie dla ciebie jeszcze od początku pomoc dla ciebie, dla uczenia języku, ale to jest takie pytanie, jeśli u ciebie jest tam że możliwość znaleźć jeszcze i uczyciela francuskiego. Dlatego, że ja myślę, że jeśli u ciebie, jeśli masz możliwości mówić i praktykować ten język, to jest bardzo to jest bardzo łatwiejsze nauczyć się francuskiego, ale trzeba od początku też myśleć, kiedyś masz czas w tygodniu. Jeśli masz na przykład, nie wiem, jak dla mnie teraz mam z syrskim językiem, mam trzy razy w tygodniu, każdy poniedziałek, każdy środa, każdy piątek mam godzinę dla irskiego. Uczę się z niekim, z niego mamy jakiś dialog albo tekst po irsku, czytamy, po tego mamy chyba, ja nie wiem, to będzie jako czytać dialog, czytać tekst, a potem to jest jako słychać audio w tym języku, to jest po irsku. I mówić i praktykować. To jest bardzo trudne, trudne wysветлить teraz, jak to może być. Tylko mam 5 minut, ale mogę jeszcze raz mówić o tym, że jak potrzebujesz działać, potrzebujesz robić z nowym językiem. Okay. Sizce Fransızca, Rusça, Çince öğrenirken farklı bir metodoloji yoksa sadece bir şeyler yapmak mı? Bana göre bu evet sadece bir şey aynı. Bu zamanım lazım. Zamansız hiçbir şey yapamam. Ama Ben her defa, her hafta 2 ya da 3 kez öğrenmem lazım. Ve bundan sonra bu dili konuşmak için bana göre çok önemli bir şey. Ve sadece bu aynı. Bundan sonra dile bağlı. Çünkü Fransızca mesela çok farklı bir dildir ve çok farklı problemler var. Çince mesela daha az fiillerle daha az problem var. Çünkü fiil Çince'de aynı. Her zaman aynı, değil mi? Türkçeden çok farklı ve Fransızcadan çok farklı bir dildir. Ama yazmak için daha zor. Çünkü onlar sadece bu karakterler kullanıyorlar ve onlar için evet yazmak için ya da okumak için daha zor olabilir. Ve bu yüzden ve gramer evet bu gramer Çince'de daha farklı da aynı. Çünkü onlar evet strüktürler daha önemli Çince'de. Bu gramer çok sık Çince'de gramer yok dinliyorum. Ama gramer var. Sadece farklı bir gramer var. Onlar daha strüktür gibi falan şeyler var. Ben bir şey bundan sonra onlar sadece bir küçük bir söz var ve bu söz çok önemli. Çünkü çok farklı ve zaman zaman karışık bir anlamla var bundan sonra. Ve bu yüzden Çince daha farklı bir metod kullanmam lazım. Ama ben gerçekten Çince İsveç'te öğrendim. Ben orada bir üniversitede Çince o 1,5 yıldır öğrendim. Ve bundan sonra sadece internette kullandım. Ama şimdi hiç konuşamam. Burada çok az Çin var ve bizden daha zor oldu. Ve benim Çincem şimdi çok unuttum. Unutmadım ama çok şey unuttum. Ama evet farklı ama aynı zamanda aynı. Çok sürekli öğrenmem lazım ve bu her zaman aynı. Her gün bir şey yapmam lazım ya da öğretmek ya da müziği dinlemek bir şey yapmam lazım. So good thing. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Have to leave now. Nice to see you. Buenas noches. Thank you for your answer. Okay, so okay. Dziękuję, fajnie było. Szukać pak, mówić po polsku. Dzięki. Ja nie wiem teraz. No to jest bardzo trudne dla mnie. Ja nie wiem, koliko czasu nie mówiłem po polsku. Ale ciągle jeszcze nieco wiem po polsku. To jest w porządku. Dzięki bardzo. Okay. Unfortunately, we have got to the time. Çok teşekkür ederim. I've got to the hour, so unfortunately I'm going to have to go. But I see that there are a lot more questions. So I do invite you, obviously, to Patreon if you want to join on Patreon, and we'll start a group properly, and we'll interact properly, and we'll keep it a lot more personal. Otherwise, I'll be back again next week to talk, and hopefully it will be working on here and also on YouTube. Thank you so much. I started with a power cut, and looks like we've got through it, so yes. Thank you, Bogum. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again. Remember to like, to follow, and to share so that we can reach more people and help more people realise that we're all in this together when it comes to language learning, and we all have our struggles and we can help each other through it. So welcome to this community. I'm glad to have you with me. I really like talking to you every week. So thank you. And happy language learning. See you soon. Bye-bye.